Hi, my name's Rachel, and today we're talking about another very popular book talk book. In fact, a book that would not exist if book talk were not a thing. This book started as a book talk skit, and now it's a book, it's getting a sequel, and film rights have been sold. Unfortunately, I do think that while this works as a skit, it does not work as a book on its own. Today we're discussing Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer, which has red sprayed edges, which is nice. There's one thing you can count on Red Tower to do, it's spray their edges and then make a book inside that just makes me go, what the frick is this? Yes, this is the same publisher as Fourth Wing. Assistant to the Villain is a book where a girl named Evie becomes the assistant to a broody villain who she immediately has the hots for. I'm not gonna lie, this book gave me the ick very quickly. Basically immediately, because of the way the main character is written. I will talk about that throughout this entire video. But what this is an attempt at comedic fantasy where the romance is the center of everything, and it's like a romantic comedy but in like a medieval setting, and also set up sort of like The Office. The romance again is the center of everything despite not really being cultivated. Plot? What plot? Why would you ask about plot? There's none of that in here. I mean, there is, but it's paper thin. I felt like this book wasted my time because despite being over 300 pages, nothing really happened. Again, it works as a skit, but I don't think there's really enough to make a good fantasy book. You need more. My specific recommendation on how I would fix this book would be to frame it around being a retelling instead of just vague fantasy stuff. Today's video was sponsored by Skillshare, and Skillshare has a great class from Kirsten White on creating retellings, and Kirsten White is the author of books like The Guinevere Deception and The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein, as well as many other retellings. She has this excellent Skillshare class called Create a Retelling of Your Favorite Story, and this class explains how to write a quality retelling where you break down the original story and ask, what are the beats of this story? What is the setting of this story? Who plays a role? How is it told? And what does it explore? I think that in creating a comedic and like whimsical kind of book like this, you need a structure like that to fall back on in order to bring the most out of your story, rather than creating one prolonged skit. In this review, I'll explain how using these questions and creating this as a retelling of more of a classic story, we could have gotten more out of it. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, and they have a wide variety of topics, everything from illustration, graphic design, photography, music, marketing, productivity, and writing. They have tons of writing classes. They have authors teaching classes such as Saba Tahir and Daniel Jose Older, and also Kirsten White. Skillshare is an online platform and it has stackable lessons so members can learn at their own pace no matter what your skill level is. So whether you want to learn the basics of digital art or how to start your own photography business, Skillshare has classes that can take you from beginner to pro with a supportive community that you can chat with and work on your projects with. This summer, invest in yourself and your goals by starting a learning journey with Skillshare to take your career, skills, or side hustle to the next level. Or finally get the tools to finish that manuscript you've been working on. The first 500 people to use my link down below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So whether you're looking to hone your writing craft or learn more about photography or art or marketing, click that link below to get your 1-month free trial of Skillshare, and thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Here's the official synopsis of Assistant to the Villain. Once upon a time meets The Office in Hannah Mayer's laugh out loud viral TikTok series turned novel about the sunshine assistant to the evil villain and their unexpected romance. It's expected. Assistant wanted. Notorious high-ranking villain seeks loyal, level-headed assistant for unspecified office duties, supporting staff for random mayhem, terror, and other dark things in general. Discretion a must. Excellent benefits. With ailing family to support, Evie Sage's employment status isn't just important, it's viral. What? Vital. Oh, Jesus, Rachel. So when a mishap with Ren Dawn's most infamous villain results in a job offer, naturally she says yes. No job is perfect, of course, but even less so when you develop a teeny crush on your terrifying, temperamental, and undeniably hot boss. Don't find evil so attractive, Evie. But just when she's getting used to severed heads suspended from the ceiling and the odd squish of an errant eyeball beneath her heel, Evie suspects this dungeon has a huge rat, and not just the literal kind, because something rotten is growing in the kingdom of Rendon, and someone wants to take the villain and his entire nefarious empire out. Now, Evie must not only resist drooling over her boss, but also figure out who exactly is sabotaging his work and ensuring he makes them pay. After all, a good job is hard to find. I feel like this is the second video I'm filming today. I just filmed a video on Gothicana, and I also feel like the synopsis for Gothicana was misleading. That's not really what happened. It makes it sound almost like Evie is the one who believes that there's a rat and like she figured it out first, but that's That's not really what happened. And also, it wasn't like she saw this ad for an assistant, which is like a cute idea, saw this ad for an assistant and then went and applied for the job. They run smack into each other and he's like, you could work for me. And then she does. And that's chapter 1. Like, okay. And that's not the only thing that I feel like was like, I felt like I was gonna get one thing and I got another, and that's part of why I didn't like this. And that has to do with this frog. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm gonna be honest, the reason I have a physical copy is because someone was nice enough to send me it. And I put that on my wish list because I saw a review that talked about this frog right here, okay? And it's this little frog with a crown, and he holds up signs and says these little messages. The frog on the cover is Kingsley, who is in the book, but I thought Kingsley was going to be an important magical animal companion figure. I listened to a review that a little bit hyped up the frog, and I then set myself up for failure. I thought that Kingsley was going to be a part of a like very comedic book, and the problem is that I don't find this humor funny. A lot of it hinges on the born sexy yesterday trope, which I hate, and the thing that I would find funny, which is this magical animal companion frog who's like very much a part of it, is not all that much a part of it. He's mostly like an irrelevant amphibian who's there to pop up and remind you he's there, and maybe you'll giggle about it if you think the rest of this book is funny, but if you don't, then it's just like, and there's the frog. What I thought was that Kingsley was going to be like Adventure Fox from Winterkeep, and I love Adventure Fox from Winterkeep. Someone was nice enough, Dolly's, you should check out on Instagram, was nice enough to make me like this handmade Adventure Fox plushie. So Adventure Fox is in the book Winterkeep, which is part of the Graceling Realm series, and by far I believe it's the best book in that series, which I love the whole series, but in particular Winterkeep is a 5-star read for me. Has so many things that I am obsessed with. That's like one of the peak mommy issues books, but it's like peak magical animal companion book because of Adventure Fox. And it's not just Adventure Fox, I also love The Fox from Even the Darkest Stars by Heather Fawcett. I'm not like I am a little partial to foxes in particular, but I just love magical animal companions in general. But I love when they are a player who saves the day or is very important to what's happening, and when we get POVs from them like we do with Adventure Fox, even better. Adventure Fox is the only reason that shit did not go off the rails in Winterkeep for the main character. I love that, and I thought that that's what would happen here, and it didn't at all. Kingsley is just sort of there to once in a while pop up and hold a sign, and it's not funny, which was really disappointing because I thought it was going to be funny. I mean, Adventure Fox named himself Adventure Fox. He named himself Adventure Fox. Adventure Fox is actually going to be in a tattoo I get in the future. I'm so excited. I'm obsessed with that creature. I'm obsessed with his POVs, and I wish that I had gotten that same feeling from Kingsley the Frog. That did not happen. What did happen in this book? Olicity from Arrow. Let me explain. There's a show called Arrow. It's a DC show. It used to be on the CW. I was obsessed. I like DC. I like Green Arrow. Obviously, I am a big fan of the show Young Justice. But in Arrow, Oliver Queen, the Green Arrow, sort of ropes into working for him Felicity Smoke. And I liked them as friends and co-workers doing less than legal things. And then when it became romantic, I hated it. Because what we were romanticizing about Felicity in particular was Felicity Smoke being infantilized and Oliver being paternalized. And that grosses me out. I hate the sexy baby trope. It's also called the born sexy yesterday trope. He's the older, almost fatherly figure who takes care of her, and she's the younger, cutesy but awkward person who works with him, but he has to help her get out of trouble and be the villain for her, but never to her. But don't worry, he'd never hurt her. What would she do without him? The power dynamic between them makes me hate any sort of romantic involvement there. And them being together romantically made me stop watching the show.
I know who you are. You're Mr. Queen.
No, Mr. Queen was my father.
Right, but he's dead. I mean, he drowned. But you didn't, which means you could come down to the IT department and listen to me babble.
I was happy to hear you're not dead anymore. I mean, I didn't know you before you didn't die the first time. I'm still glad you're alive.
You're cute.
I'm very particular about what it is I put in my body.
I've noticed. I said not notice. Right?
Don't look down.
Too late. I should mention I'm afraid of heights, which I just learned.
Felicity, hold on to me tight.
I imagined you saying that under different circumstances. Very platonic circumstances.
Password is Snapdragon.
Password?
Snapdragon.
You know, slot machines, I mean, how do you call yourself a casino without any lucky sevens?
Stay focused, please. I'll be with you the entire time.
Thanks.
Feels really good having you inside me. And by you, I mean your voice. And by me, I mean my ear. I gotta stop talking right now.
That would be my preference.
So when I opened Assistant to the Villain and it was Olicity to a T from the jump, I was immediately out. Now, I usually grab the casts that fans pick for big book talk books. I just go on the Fancast website and I grab whoever y'all are picking, except when y'all use Henry Cavill for everybody. But in this case, I just picked Oliver and Felicity as who I'm gonna use in this video to, you know, display who's talking, because that's how I pictured them, because the dynamics between them are identical. And I was identically uncomfortable with both. And I'll elaborate on how many times I got the ick from the paternalism and infantilization, and I'll explain why that happened, or like in what ways that happened. But before I continue, if you are an Olicity shipper, this book is for you, and that's fine. No shade, more power to you. Your ick does not have to be my ick. Like what you like. Now, I don't mind younger protege and father-like mentee, like a mentor-mentee relationship, which is what we see here. So that's fine. That's great even. But once it becomes romantic between like the players in this, that's when I get the ick, because one is childlike and one is father-like, and that feels inappropriate to me. So that being at the forefront of every single interaction, every single scene between these two main characters is the reason why I gave this 2 stars, and then the plot itself is the reason I bumped it down to 1. I think that this is not good. Real quick, I just want to interject here that I think a really good example of Grumpy Sunshine that worked was Wreck-It Ralph. This book was like if Ralph and the Glitch, I can't remember her name, Vanellope. If Ralph and Vanellope had a romance, that would have been gross. That's what this book feels like, because he's the big, strong, broody brute of a man, a literal grown man, and she is the little baby, sometimes sarcastic, cute, sweet, but also a little sour child. And it works when they're friends, but this book, the reason it gives me the ick is because it's like if Princess Vanellope and Wreck-It Ralph were a couple. I want to say also one more thing before we continue. I understand now after the fact. I did not know that this was a skit series before I put it on my wish list and somebody bought it for me. That happened after the fact, and I can show you that I found out about this book in, I want to say September, August, around there, from a mutual who reviewed it and gave it a glowing review. And I texted a friend of mine and said, I think that this is going to be the Red Tower book for me. I didn't like Fourth Wing. I think this is the one. That sounds right up my alley. Months later, after the book had been bought for me and I still hadn't read it yet, another one of my mutuals read it and said, this is not good. And I texted them, and you can see it, and I said, am I gonna hate that book? Because as you can see, I texted my other friend and said, I think I'm gonna love this. Well then, friend one, after I started the book, I texted back and said, I hate it. And I thought I was gonna like this. I told people months ago that I thought that this was gonna be like at least a 4-star read for me. That seems right up my alley. I love The Office. I love talking animals. I like, you know, silly humor in a medieval setting. This is not what I thought I was gonna get, okay? So I just wanna get that out of the way. I never watched the skits before seeing the review and putting the book on my wish list, having it bought for me. I still had not watched the skits until after I had read the book. I did not want to go look because I did not want it to taint my reading experience. All that to say that I went into this with good faith, okay? You can see my text messages here. I went into this with good faith. I thought I was going to love this. This is a review of a book, okay? I understand that I got a DM telling me that there were people going into Goodreads comments arguing with reviews of this book that didn't like it. Don't make that a thing here. That's so inappropriate and awkward. If you are a huge fan of the author and her skits, I think that's great. Bully for you. I'm happy for you. I don't like this book, and I'm going to be explicitly clear about why I don't like this book. If you disagree with me, that is okay, but a review of a book is not bullying. I am only giving my thoughts on the book. I am not giving my thoughts on the skits. I'm not reviewing skits here. I am just reviewing a book. I'm not reviewing a person. I'm just reviewing what I saw, okay? And if you like the book, I'm happy for you. If everything I say in here sells the book for you, I am happy for you, as long as I am being honest and I, you know, help you make a decision either way, I feel like I did my job. So if you like the book, or if you like the idea of it after I review it, happy for you. Let's not fight, because this is not bullying, this is a book review, okay? Okay. Fuck, I hate disclaimers. The fact that I still have to fucking do this like years later. Okay, moving on. So this book is set up where it sort of feels like medieval, maybe 1500s. I don't know. I don't know exactly what time period, but it's like silly. So, you know, kind of like watching Monty Python and the Holy Grail, except Monty Python is funny. So we learn immediately that our main character, Evangelina Sage, has lost her job at the blacksmith and that her dad doesn't know, and she had an opportunity for a different job at the job fair, but then she gave it to somebody else who she thought might need it more, thus like very quickly in like the first page establishing that our main character has the personality quality of being nice. Also establishing that this writing style has the quality of relying on convenience. So she's walking, we are still in the prologue, and she comes across a river that is slowly turning from blue to red, and she realizes that something must be laying upstream losing a lot of blood. So she goes upstream to find the thing that is losing a lot of blood and sees what she thinks is a beast. This was all very, very silly in its I don't understand why it was written this way. It just feels like we like very hastily wrote this first chapter, this meet cute that is very odd, and then we didn't go back and think maybe there's a better way to do this. So it's not a beast, it's actually a hot guy. This beast hot guy grabs her, pulls her down, and within like 30 seconds of us meeting him, he's like, do you know who I am? And he is the titular villain. She thought the villain was an old guy. Why does everybody think the villain is an old guy? I still don't know, even having finished the book. But somehow he's this young hot guy. Wow. Isn't that convenient for her? This book went downhill in the introduction. I tell you what, I have never seen something go downhill so fast and with such quickness and reveal itself to be so shallow with such urgency. So he was being chased not because he's the villain, because in actuality nobody knows what the villain looks like. He was being chased because he has a frog. The frog's name is Kingsley, as I've talked about, who uses signs to communicate, not sign language, like literal little signs. And people want talking frogs because they are valuable. This is not important to the story whatsoever. And it says he's a murderer, but the majority of her found him too pretty to care. This is the introduction. And while I understand it's supposed to be a little silly, this is an imbalanced amount of silly for an introduction. I barely know this woman, but I already know that she is willing to forgive murder for some dimples. I sort of want to reach through the book already at this point and shake her and tell her to get a grip, which does not bode well for the rest of the book. Again, we are in the prologue. My reading experience should not be like this right from the jump. So they're hiding from men who are trying to kill him, and he's like, they'll kill you too. I don't understand how people can just kill people for wanting a talking frog, but I don't understand this world at all. He's like, they'll kill you too. And instead of thinking like a reasonable thing, which is like, oh, this puts me between a rock and a hard place. I'm between one murderer and several other murderers. And why he just immediately told her, hey, by the way, I'm the villain, beyond me. Again, though, instead of thinking that she is between one murderer and several others, she's thinking about how hot this guy is. In fact, specifically, she's thinking about what he would smell like if she leaned in closer. Now, personally, I don't give a shit what a murderer smells like, because I'm not going to be sticking around long enough to find out. I'm not dying first. But not our main character, not a brain cell in sight. And I want to read you this part. First of all, it says that his healer, Tatiana, can remove memories, which never comes up again, which is odd. He offers her a job immediately in the introduction, in the prologue, and he points out, again, we are in the introduction, you fall down often, thus painting her immediately as a klutz, which is so fun. But here's the interesting thing. It says, is there something about my face that is displeasing to you, or is it perhaps that I'm bleeding from 3 different woods courtesy of the men in your village? Did he think she was judging him? Yes, the blood's not great, but I was referring to the fact that you look like you were carved out of marble, and I just think that as a rule of thumb, inherently evil people should be grotesque looking. Is there a different way I'm supposed to be reading this? Because I feel like that's the only way I'm supposed to be reading this. And it's not how the audiobook didn't read the book. You just can't kill people and be pretty. It's confusing. And then she hands him a scarf and says, for the blood, your evilness. Again, this would be fine if that was a child speaking, but it is not a child speaking. It is a grown-ass woman. So she takes a job with him. And then chapter 1 is the same shit. In fact, the whole book is the same shit. But chapter 1, we have a time jump 5 months later. But we just jump to 5 months later, her still thinking about how hot the villain is and how clumsy she is. She falls on her butt. There's innuendo. There's a girl named Becky who who works for the villain, and Becky is not nice. Chapter 2, she goes to the healer who works for the villain. The healer's name is Tatiana. Tatiana says, oh, you fell on your ass, you have a bruised tailbone. The chapter ends with her saying to Tatiana that she had a dirty dream about the villain. Immediately after this, there's a moment where it's like oh, he's right behind me, isn't he? And this happens over and over and over again. This is the first hint we get that it has all the humor of a Disney show, which again is fine for the children that it's written for. But when it's adults and that humor is supposed to be sexy, I'm confused and uncomfortable. Sort of like how we all collectively feel watching those Nickelodeon shows back now and wondering what the fuck was going on with the creator. I don't understand how I'm supposed to be feeling about this other than I have the ick. Chapter 3, she goes face burning to talk to the villain, and we harp on how attractive he is again. Then we switch to actual like world building and character building. But we just had a prologue and almost like 3 full chapters of like going over and over how hot this man is and how silly and goofy and cutesy and klutzy our main character is, to the point where everybody treats her like a child. We then learn in chapter 3 that for some reason the king doesn't mess with the villain's affairs. What are those affairs? I don't actually know. Something weapons, something he takes the king's men back to his castle and beheads them. What are they doing? I don't know. What is this office full of people doing? I don't know. I know what happens, and this is comped as being the office, right? Okay, I understand what's going on in the office. We take the time to understand what's going on in the office. I don't just know who the boss is and who the secretary is and who the romance is between, the secretary and somebody else. I know who works in accounting, what they do, how that interacts with the stuff that goes on in sales. I understand the office because the office was built. This isn't built. I don't know who does what and why. I know that the office, Dunder Mifflin, sells paper, and I know who they sell it to. I don't know what these people are doing. I have no idea. There's interns here. I don't know what they're doing. And like, if you're gonna make it. Do the whole thing. Don't just like, this isn't a skit. This is a book. You have to actually build these things. Otherwise, I'm sitting here being like, this is sort of like watching a play and I can, see the stage hands and stage blacks. You don't want your book to be like that. I don't want to see the cracks. I want to be fully immersed so I feel like I'm there. It's your job to fully immerse your audience by making it so that there aren't all of these cracks and holes and stage blacks and things that I can see through. Things that are breaking immersion. Like, I don't know, not building your world and answering basic questions. Chapter 4, I'm just doing like very basic overviews of like highlights that happen because basically nothing happens until around chapter 6, which is, not great. Chapter 4, we get introduced to the Dragon Master, who, let's be honest, should be the main character instead of Evie. Blade, the Dragon Master, the guy who, is the keeper of the dragon for the villain, he should have been the main character. Becky is very much the Angela of the office, and I guess you could sort of say this guy is like a mishmash of like, no, he's Andy. No, he's very Andy. So this is like Andy and Angela actually, working. Eventually they're going to be a couple because Blade in this case is very into Becky. Andy, Angela, Blade, and Becky. Oh, huh. So then chapter 6, surprising me because I didn't think this was going to happen, we switched to the villain's POV. I mean, we're still in third. The whole book is written in third, but it's, third person, but hit the villain. So do you want to guess what the first thing we do in the villain's head is? Is it A, think about villain shit, monologue a little bit? B, think about his inevitable tragic past? C, think about the stress of running a business in this economy? Or D, think about his assistant and the fact that she smells like vanilla? Did you guess C? You're wrong, it's D. All he thinks about is his assistant and how she smells like vanilla. They find that there's a mole in the office, not the rodent, an actual person who is squirreling out information to the king. They discuss the mole, him and Evie discuss the mole, and they're making plans to try to figure out what to do about it. And she says, by the way, I would torture somebody for you. And I'm like, bitch, hold on. We are 6 chapters in. All I know about this man is that he's bad, I guess. There's a mole in his office. You're his assistant. You both have the hots for each other and you're clumsy. I don't need to know that you would torture somebody for him. I need to know know basic foundations of this relationship and basic foundations of who you each individually are as a person in order for me to care about you individually and then care about you together. We're not doing that. We're jumping from he meets her in the prologue to I torture somebody for you in chapter 6. Why? He leaves this conversation, goes to do, I don't know, ambiguous villain shit, and he's like in the middle of, I don't know, random villain work that I can't even remember what it was because it's so unimportant to the story, obviously. He focuses on a thought. He's like, oh, she said she would torture somebody for me. No, I can't think about that right now. I don't have time. And I'm like, sir, I don't have time. I don't have time. The one who does not have time is me. We have not done basic building of your character, her character, let alone the two of you together. I don't care about you individually, let alone you guys thinking about each other. I don't know you. We have done no character work. We are 6 chapters in to a very short book. This is 340 pages. Yeah, 340 pages, and we are 6 chapters in. So we're 50 pages in and we have done nothing. We have done innuendo. We have done reiteration that he's broody and she's klutzy and silly and goofy and childlike. That's all. We have done no world building. I don't know who you guys are individually. This is ridiculous. Thankfully, this is a moment when we finally get introduced to some magic. Finally, he has magic, but nobody can see his magic except him. It's a gray mist and it tells him where enemies' weak points are. I don't hate this. I think that's a deeply original idea. I like that. I wish that we'd done anything with it because we didn't. In fact, I don't even understand the magic system in this world. Is it bestowed by gods? Does it manifest? Why does it manifest? I don't know. We didn't get any answers. We just threw some random factoids in there and then never did any building, any structure of it. And it says that the act of killing makes the villain's powers stronger. What this means, like what the limits of this are, I'm not sure. Does this mean that he can identify more weak points? I'm not sure. Evie finds a bomb in the office. She tries to leave with it. She gets stuck. Her shoe gets stuck. And the villain shows up and somehow saves Evie, but part of his lair castle gets blown up. And of course, immediately after this, he's like, let me carry you to safety. Gripping her arms around his neck, which of course was thick and corded with muscle. I know he's muscular. That's one of the only things that I know about him. I know he's muscular, she's ditzy, and they're attracted to each other, and that's all I know. I don't need it reiterated. Thank you. Tristan the villain, oh by the way, his name is Tristan with a Y, is like, you should go work somewhere else and I'll give you severance pay. This is so dangerous. And she's like, wow, with that money I could hire a private tutor for my sister and get my dad a specialized healer, but this job is the only thing I have for me. What are you doing at this job? I would love to know. I feel like I don't know. Okay, I know that's selfish. Yes, it's actually a combination of selfish and stupid. Congrats on that. He escorts her home because again, there was a bomb and she got a boo-boo ouchie. And he introduces himself to her little sister using his whole ass government name. His government name. And Evie is like, what name did you give my sister? And he's like, well, my whole ass government name. And she's like, well, now I'm concerned about your safety. And he's like, how dare you be concerned about my safety? And I'm like, how dare you both subject me to this conversation? She's like, is your name really Tristan? And he's like, yeah, what did you think my name was? And she says, I thought it might be something like Fluffy. I'm not joking. I had a dog named Fluffy once. It's a lovely name. Stop. This is another conversation that just fell completely out of place in a book that is this horny because it's childish. You know what it is? It's like trying to eat two things at once that do not go together. Like, I love spicy tuna rolls, and I also love to go to Sourdough Company in St. Pete, Florida, and get cinnamon sugar sourdough Pop-Tarts. I would never combine those two and eat them in one bite. It's jarring. This kind of sweetness is completely fine in a middle grade book where it makes sense that the characters are young. But when we take that into infantilization and pair it with horniness, it's like eating that cinnamon sugar Pop-Tart and spicy tuna roll at once. Something is very wrong with that. It tastes bad. And then he tells her that she doesn't need to worry about him giving her sister his whole government name because it's literally on a plaque in his office. And I'm listening to her be like, no, it's not. I would have noticed it. And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing here? So everybody has seen this on his desk. Nobody calls him by his first name. Why did he even put that on his desk? And how did his assistant just not see it? Like, Are we really building our main character to be this fucking stupid on purpose? Are you serious? Why? Not only does she not know that her boss, who she's the assistant to, has a plaque on his desk that has his name on it, but I'm supposed to believe that this same woman is able to figure out that he had a fucking bomb in his desk? Was this written in a hurry? What the fuck are we doing? He tells her to meet him at a tavern the next day because they are investigating the bomb / who is the mole, and he recognizes the timepiece inside of the bomb. Now, I thought, okay, this is gonna take a turn for the better. Maybe it's not that bad. I like the idea of going around seeing who, you know, created the pieces, and then, you know, we find out like who's behind the mole. And then I thought, okay, well, logically it's probably, you know, has to do with the king. So maybe the king has like a whole band of guards that are out doing this, and if Tristan finds those guards, then he takes out the bad guys, and then the king has to, you know, scramble to still try to figure out who the villain is. But the villain doesn't seem to be hiding who his name is at all, and yet the townspeople don't know what his name is and think that he's an old ass man. But then you come to find out in the end that the king has known all along who the villain is, and there's no reason he's hiding it. It just doesn't get explained. At the bar, Evie's former boyfriend Rick is there because of course that's the thing that's happening, because we have to make it a point to show that Tristan is such a man in comparison to every other man in Evie's life, including but not limited to her ex-boyfriend, her former boss, and later her own father. And in fact, we even go so far as to make sure that we note that sex with Rick, the ex-boyfriend, was disappointing and not at all like the sex in her romance books. So when the villain walks in, Evie says that she's going to pretend that her and the villain are fucking to make Rick embarrassed and go away. I can already tell that when the inevitable sex comes up in this series, which there is none in this book, but I'm sure it'll come later, and I gotta tell you, I am worried about how that's gonna, the first time he calls her a good girl, I'm really gonna scream, because I cannot deal with, like, good girl is fine when the book has not been written in a way that infantilizes a grown woman the whole time. When we've done that, nope, no. When the inevitable sex comes up in this series, the villain is going to have the best dick to ever dick, because that's just how this goes. And the way I know this for sure is that taking the time to set up a person like Rick as the other guy that Evie used to fuck, who was disappointing, only means that the next guy that Evie's going to fuck and not be disappointing is the love interest. Why did we even bother to do this? This is such a boring and lazy way to write. It's a boring and lazy way to write a love interest. It's completely unnecessary. You can have sex with somebody and it not be boring and you're still not compatible, and I would really like to see that more in books. Maybe he and her had nothing in common. Maybe it's not that we have to paint the villain as such a great option because all the other men everywhere in Evie's life are shit in every possible way. We didn't have to do that. That's really lazy. But it gets worse because of course Evie is so infantilized and makes the stupidest comments in innuendo. She's like, you should go, he and I have lots to do, like each other. Rick tells the villain good luck, as in with Evie, and of course the villain says luck is something you'll certainly need if you'll ever bother Evie again. Boo! Boo! He's only nice to one person, and it's this infantilized girl that he definitely wants to fuck even though she's childlike. Because just like Wreck-It Ralph,
and I say, Zangief, you are bad guy, but this does not mean you're bad guy.
This is so, I like Grumpy Sunshine. I don't like Grumpy Sunshine when we write it like this. It's just lazy. He would hurt any man, only men though, he never is gonna hurt women. He would hurt any man who is mean to her because we just treat other men with violence if, you know, you mess with the one person that this violent man cares about. But every other man is bad that also does violence, but he's the nice guy because he does violence on behalf of Evie's honor. Stupid. So the guy that made the timepiece, the guy that they are there at the bar to see, they see him. Evie calls him over pretending that she knows him, trying to get him to come over, and a bunch of people are like, you know, annoyed that she's being loud, and she sticks her tongue out at people because at every opportunity we have to make sure that Evie is made out to be a child in an adult's body. Anyways, the man comes over, he sees the villain and goes, what are you doing here, brother? Now this would have been more fun if we had had a family doing nefarious shit all in different ways, and the villain is actually several different people all in this family, but no, no. The brother only comes up once, and he never comes back. I missed him. The next chapter is the villain's POV, and we find out that the last time this man and his brother saw each other, he tried to stab him with a spear. We never find out anything more about this. He also has a sister who he gets along with fine. Of course, because we only do violence to men, right? Great. He thinks to himself, I can't believe my brother, whose name is Malcolm, tried to set off a bomb in my office. A bomb that almost killed Evie. Why are you jumping to conclusions? You're supposed to be the villain. You're supposed to be smart. And he's like, I can't think about Evie sitting there with her wide eyes. And we have taken another opportunity to showcase that Evie is like a child. See, Evie's mannerisms, not just the tongue sticking out, but the regular mannerisms that she does on a daily basis. In fact, I can show you how much they come up. Her eyes are widening all the time. And also, my favorite, her nose is always scrunching in a way that Tristan finds adorable. And see, on its own, that probably wouldn't be a problem, but the context of her sticking her tongue out and all the klutz and all the innuendo, she's made out to be a child. And these childlike qualities are what he is attracted to about her, and it grosses me out. Instead of establishing why these brothers' relationship is the way it is, at any point, we just ignore that, but we also don't, sub in explaining why the relationship is between the two characters. We are spending more time in the villain's head thinking about how he wants to use his magic to hurt his brother, but then he's like, Evie is here and I can't help but feel more grounded when she's around. We are 25% into this book at this point. I don't know these people. I feel like they barely know each other. I don't understand the connection here. She's mad at him for not telling her things. Her eyes are wrinkling. Her cheeks are turning red. She says, you lied to me. Malcolm tells them, I didn't try to kill you. I sold that timepiece to somebody, and I can tell you something about them is that they had glowing blue ink on their hands. That's our next clue. Blue, make sure to write it in your handy dandy notebook, since this main character belongs in an episode of Blue's Clues with how childish she is. Evie goes home and suddenly has a realization, oh my god, someone tried to use his own brother to get to him. Does that mean that they might use her to get to him next? Bitch. Wrong question. The question is, does that mean that whoever's coming for him already knows he's the villain, already knows his identity? And if so, maybe ask him, is there somebody who would go after you that knows your identity, your government name? She doesn't ask. But why would we ask that? Because then we couldn't reveal it at the end and pretend it was a shocking moment. They're still trying to figure out who the mole is, not just figure out who who bought the bomb and brought it in, but like who made the bomb, but who the mole is that got the bomb made. So Blade, the Dragon Master, who I previously said was like Andy, has a letter about employment from King Benedict's castle. And Evie is like, it's you, you're the mole. So at this point, he reveals that he's actually from the Gleaming City, which is where the king lives apparently, the capital. And his dad is a political advisor. He had previously claimed he found the dragon egg. Turns out he stole it from the castle. She tells him, you have to tell the villain this. This makes you look so guilty if you just have this letter. You have to go tell him about your actual backstory. Here's what I wrote in my notes, okay? I'm sure that now, since we've done Blade, next up with a secret they're hiding from the boss will be Becky. Do you want to guess if I was right? I was right. Apparently the blue ink that was on the hands of the person who bought the bomb timepiece, the ink... The blue ink could only be procured by a woman named Claire. Did you think that the villain only had one sibling, by the way? Wrong. I might have mentioned it. He has a sister. Claire is his sister, the one who works with the magical inks. Why didn't we do a whole family competing against each other to do villainous shit? That sounds fun. Imagine if we paired that idea with like a Robin Hood retelling. I'm just saying, but in the end, I cared about this family about as much as I cared about the Kardashian family, which is to say, I do not. She and the healer, Claire, his sister, and the healer, Tatiana, used to be together, but Claire drove her away. Tatiana went to go work for the villain, and now Claire and Tati hate each other. They should have been the main characters. I would have had more fun. Ex-girlfriend of the villain and Claire being the villain would have been way more fun. I'm a little confused about the ink magic in this. I don't hate the idea of ink magic. In fact, one of my patrons, Alice, has a series called Sacred Ink that is available on Alice's Patreon, and it has ink magic in it, and it is an absolute delight. It's one of the weirdest yet best things that you will come across, especially if you like ink magic. Shout out to Alice if you're watching. I love ink magic, okay? I also just read A River of Royal Blood recently, and that also has ink magic. I understood it there. It was explained. I don't get it here. So then we get told that Claire made the villain some ink, which he then used this ink to go to a bargain maker to make Evie's employment contract, which is like a literal like mark on her arm and on his, and it ensures her loyalty. Now, I assumed at this point that everybody had one of these. And I'm like, okay, well then, if everybody has one of those, then wouldn't that mean that you would find out who the mole was by who died from their employment contract being broken and the ink poisoning them, right? Wouldn't that be it? So whoever's dead is the mole? But we don't even touch on this. We just ignore it. So I'm not sure. Is Evie the only one with an employment bargain? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. The man who bought the ink from Claire with the blue ink on his hands, so the person who bought all these different things and made this bomb, she says like, oh, he was one of the Valiant Guards, which is King Benedict's guards. And Claire says to him, when will it be enough, Tristan? This last hateful decade of revenge can end. So it turns out that Tristan and the King Benedict have a history. Who could have guessed? And of course, Evie's reaction to this, nose scrunching, wide eyes, childlike wonder. And instead of asking and answering basic questions, we still get long ass descriptions in every single chapter about them being attracted to each other. Tristan gets the letter that Blade had about employment, which why Blade didn't just throw it away, I have no idea. Why Blade didn't just tell Tristan, I have no idea. And instead of, asking whose is this, because he found it in Evie's stuff, because Evie was trying to convince Blade, if you don't tell Tristan, I will. He thinks that it's Evie's letter of employment from King Benedict. He's like, it's you're the mole. She's like, oh, you don't trust me? How had one simple misunderstanding turned into this? Because it was written that way. We are flying at breakneck speed past any answering, logical questions, asking logical questions, or even taking a route for actual plot. And we're just going straight, like the fastest way we possibly can, to the end of this book where they will kiss. Like that's what we're doing here. And it mentions at this point that her mom was suffering from depression. Her mom left. Her dad was no help. Now she feels like this is just another person failing her. And he demands to know about the letter, and instead of just explaining, she quits. So we're just gonna, okay. But she made that employment bargain. It is inked into her skin, and it could release a poison over a broken bargain. Does regular quitting constitute breaking a bargain? I don't know. The bargain was for her to be loyal, and it was. So again, it stands to reason that if that's how the bargain works, then the letter being hers is impossible, and he should know that, and she should say, if I had betrayed you, then my bargain would have killed me, right? So how is that possible? And then he would have had to explain that that's not really an employment bargain, but we'll get there. But it doesn't make sense that she didn't at least bring it up to him and say, how could I have betrayed you? I have this employment bargain from you. Blade asks him, hey, what can I name the dragon? And the villain says Fluffy. And then Blade comes clean that the letter is his, and he only kept the letter to remind himself that he made the right choice in coming to work for the villain, which is such a stupid reason to keep a letter. He explains, like, Evie was keeping the letter to make sure that I fessed up, but no, make no mistake, sir, she's completely loyal to you. Okay, I mean, yeah, obviously. And again, she should still have asked, why didn't the employment bargain strike me dead? Wouldn't that have happened if I had betrayed you? But anyways, now the villain feels bad. Back at Evie's house, her dad mentions how her absent mom killed her brother. Apparently, Evie's mom had star magic. If I had to take a guess, this will probably be hereditary, and Evie will end up with some sort of magic. It doesn't come up in this book, but whatever. And her mom, Nura, who calls her Hasibsi. Anyway, Nura, her mom, is gone. After their mom, Nura, had Evie's little sister, Lissa, her magic awoke and she was blessed by the gods with the power of starlight, which is very rare. Again, I don't really understand if we're saying like blessed by the gods, like sort of like, oh wow, what a blessing, or if it's like literal. I don't really know. I don't really understand. Like the gods didn't really get fleshed out here, which is fine. I don't think that this book in particular needs to explain its pantheon or anything. I have some basic questions about the magic system, and I don't have a lot of answers. I can't really explain the magic system to you. If you would like a complicated magic system that I can mostly explain, try Spin of Fate by A.A. Bora. That's a great book. The magic drained the life from Nura, I guess. Their dad asked Evie to lighten the load, be the oldest sibling, and so you would think that this would really inform who Evie is, being the older sister, but in no way does she give off older sister vibes. And it explained that Evie's mother killed her brother with her starlight/fire. Her mother had put her baby sister down, Lissa, and just ran off. The dad says he thinks that this was on purpose. Evie doesn't. I don't really like the way that this was written. It felt a little insensitive. I'm particularly triggered by postpartum depression and harm to children, especially boys, because I'm a mom of 2 boys. I experienced a really traumatic birth with my second kid after having 2 miscarriages, and I had a lot of postpartum issues. in the hospital, I had social services called on me because they wouldn't release my kid from the NICU, first of all, which was ridiculous because there was no reason after a certain point that he should have been in the NICU. And I was so depressed and I couldn't find my meds and I couldn't get anybody to fill my Lexapro, and I just had a baby. He's 2 weeks into the NICU. I can't breastfeed him. He's having seizures. I was losing it, man. And I felt like so villainized by social services because I yelled at a doctor, and it felt like they were saying like I was dangerous. So I have like a lot of trauma surrounding that. So this just felt like a little insensitive there, but again, that is super subjective. So I don't know, just take that with a grain of salt. If you have any like trauma surrounding that like I do, because that doesn't really get worked out in this book. It doesn't get explained by the end, whether or not she like, you know, actually killed her son or not, if she did it on purpose. So just know that it feels like, you know, magic being used as an allegory, and I don't even know that this was on purpose, but it felt like magic being used as an allegory for postpartum. I don't like it. I was uncomfortable. But again, that's super subjective. I don't even know that that was on purpose. That might just be my interpretation that is fully informed by my trauma. So, okay, moving along. Evie had made a plan previously, some sort of work plan. I, again, don't know what it is because I don't understand what the logistics of that they're doing in this office. She had made a plan previously that the villain had signed off on, and he can't read the appraiser's handwriting, and Evie can. And this annoys Becky, the office mean girl, the Angela. And Tristan is like, oh wow, our office doesn't function without Evie. And I'm like, wait, then how the fuck were you functioning before? You have been the villain for how long now? You have that moniker. I mean, were you called the amateur or were you called the villain? Because Jesus, this place is a shit show without no scrunch girl. Are you serious? Becky says she doesn't want Evie to come back, but she deserves to come back. So she does go back to work. Are you wondering where the plot is? Me fucking too. He says he thinks to himself that he feels happy to see her, which he feels is positively vile. Evie says that it hurt her feelings, but she shouldn't have quit so abruptly. He apologized, and then they have this conversation where she finds out that he's scared of the dark, and then he says, no, I'm not. The dark is afraid of me, which to be honest is the most I ever related to this man because I say the same thing. I am scared of the dark. And she giggles and her nose scrunches again, so that's great. What is Evie afraid of, you may ask? Ladybugs. The spots scare her. It says the author just does the absolute most to make this grown woman seem like a literal child. The longer I read, the worse it gets. We still do not have an understanding here of the dynamic between the villain and the kingdom/king. I don't understand what the common people think of Tristan the villain. I don't understand why the king, who obviously knows that Tristan is the villain, doesn't just tell everybody Tristan is the villain. I don't understand why Tristan doesn't tell everybody that Tristan's the villain. I don't understand why anybody's keeping anything from anybody if they already know. I don't see the benefit, and it's not explained. Evie asked the villain, you've been doing this for 10 years. 10 years. She's been working there 5 months, and he's been running this place for 10 years. Somehow, no scrunch girl fixed everything. You've been doing this for 10 years, right? So why is the king suddenly sending a mole into your office now? I don't think that's the most logical question to ask, actually. I think that if all efforts have previously failed to end the villain doing whatever the fuck he's doing, which by the way, I still don't know. It just says sabotaging the kingdom and being the king's enemy, which is very vague. So if you've been doing vague evil shit for 10 years now and not been stopped, then a mole actually makes total sense to me. Nothing else has worked to capture the villain. Why not send a mole into the office? Evie doesn't need to be made more stupid looking by asking this, and yet here we are. However, the intention isn't to make Evie look stupid in this case. It's to make the audience not have the answers to basic questions that the audience is definitely already asking. The author's trying to beat around the bush and refocus your attention onto questions so that the audience has some information. But if your main character hasn't caught up to the audience's obvious logical questions, the next step, you can't redirect by asking different questions. It just makes your main character look stupid. And it's frustrating for the audience and feels really cheap as a storytelling tactic. Tristan's answer for why the mole now is, perhaps I finally become enough of a nuisance, or since the people think I'm a horrid monster, serving my head on a platter when it suits him will make him a hero. Or that is not What? No. Because then the next logical question is, okay, then why didn't it serve him 8 years ago? The question was, why now? So if you are saying, well, he wants to be a hero, okay, that still doesn't answer the question of why now. How does it suit him to wait 10 years to do that? What purpose does that serve? Evie says, or it took him 10 years to find someone willing to go undercover and work for you. Someone willing to risk that you'd find them out eventually. Okay, I guess. I just don't really understand why we are fixating on the idea that it's one person when why aren't we even entertaining the idea that it could be multiple? The villain at least is supposed to be a smart guy, right? You've been doing this for 10 years. This is really stupid. So then they agree, which came out of nowhere, that the mole must be smuggling info out via code. Why do they agree on this? I don't know. These employees all go home at night, right? What's the need of a code? Couldn't they just go home, write the king a little note, and ta-da, they're the mole? I don't fucking understand. And in fact, that's what happened. There was no code. Evie asks, what could he have done to start this war between you? King Benedict is well liked. Women are all allowed to be employed. He's even tried to make it so women can run businesses. And Tristan makes a joke saying he stepped on my foot once, which honestly was kind of funny. It's not laugh out loud funny, but at least there's one funny part of this book. But then he doesn't answer, thus prolonging answers for the audience for no good reason, which you do need to have a good reason why you aren't having him answer basic questions, because she is trying to help him find the mole. And in order to do that, having her be fully informed, especially as his employee, as his assistant who works there, it doesn't make sense that he's avoiding it. She doesn't even think, gee, why didn't he answer? She just moves on. Evie and the villain go talk to a blacksmith because there's something relevant-ish with weapons, I forget. Because again, that's how much of a backseat the importance of it took. Evie doesn't want to go talk to this particular blacksmith though because she used to work for him and he drunkenly made a move on her once. Because this writing is ridiculous, I could guess already how this scene was going to go, just like what happened with Rick, her ex-boyfriend. It was only ever going to be written to make the villain look good in comparison to another man. Now it's her former employer rather than her former boyfriend. He will likely, I wrote this down before reading the scene, he will likely threaten this guy, or Evie will feel empowered because the villain is there telling her, it's your choice, Sarah. Just kidding, wrong book. And she will threaten him herself. Either way, this is lazy and shallow. So it turned out it was a little bit of both. Great! They tell the blacksmith, hey, we're getting an exotic animal. Very dangerous. It's a guvra, a serpent with bat wings. How is that much different than a dragon? It's not. We want you to make a collar. And he says, oh, I've made a collar for a dragon before, solicited by one of the king's guards. Now, while this is happening, he's messing with a knife that is somehow, despite not touching Evie, making her shoulder hurt and burn. The blacksmith agrees to tell them about the collar, the dragon collar that he made, if Tristan will pay him. So then the guy tells the story. He says, a man came in asking for a very particular order for the king. The villain says, did you happen to see what this man looked like? The blacksmith, I didn't. He wore a mask. It had the king's symbol on it. A mask? Earlier he said it was solicited by a king's guard, so why aren't we saying a guard's mask? Like, just why not say a man came in asking for a very particular order. One of the king's guards came in, because that's what you said happened earlier. Why are we rewriting this? The villain, and he requested a dragon collar for the king. Yes, idiot, that's what we just reiterated. Why is this conversation written so fucking weird? The blacksmith, that's most peculiar, isn't it? No shit, buddy. That's why this guy just paid you 5 gold coins to tell him what happened, because it's fucking peculiar, not for shits and giggles. What the fuck is this conversation? And the blacksmith notes that it's peculiar because the king had no need for it, as in the collar. I don't know why he assumed this. I mean, the king can't just up and like procure a dragon if he wanted to and not tell the common people about it. He's the king. This conversation, I read over it probably 5 times because I was so fucking confused about what we were doing. This is like a conversation you have in a dream, and then when you wake up, you're like, wow, I was really saying a lot of shit, wasn't I? With a lot of conviction. I was really like saying it, but now that I'm awake and I'm thinking back over what I said, none of that makes any fucking sense. The king can't change his mind about getting a dragon? Okay. And then get a collar for it? Is that it? Is that what's peculiar? I really don't know what the context is here. And then he moves on to saying that the guard was doing some undercover work. So the guard, or not guard, showed up and spilled the beans to this random blacksmith about being undercover? That's what I'm being asked to believe? Okay. Apparently, people think the king's been too passive with the villain, he says. King Benedict has a good heart. There's a rumor that the villain is his former mentee, and that's why he lets him get away with all this. But the undercover guy who was here said that the collar he was having made would go directly to the villain's lair at Massacre Manor. The king found out about the villain acquiring a dragon, and the collar was to be a subtle message to the villain that his days of wreaking havoc were over. Okay. So, if you think that the villain, there's a rumor that the villain was his former mentee, wouldn't that sort of narrow down who would be the villain? Wouldn't the people like have an idea, oh, that might be Tristan so-and-so then? No? I don't know. So Evie says, oh, my boss won't be needing your services for the collar after all. And the blacksmith gets mad at her for talking to him and calls her an insolent brat. The villain steps in and calms the blacksmith down. I don't understand this scene at all. The whole fucking thing makes no fucking sense. And then the blacksmith comes after the villain with the dagger that he'd been messing with. And of course, the villain overpowers him. He breaks the blacksmith's wrist, which isn't great considering he works with his hands. And this whole scene is just Tristan being like, I take responsibility for the bad things I do. Unlike you, I'm such a better man. It's so fucking shallow. The villain realizes the link between her shoulder pain and the dagger, and he explains that she has what's called a death blow in her shoulder, and if she gets hit a certain way in it by his own magic, she'll die. This shit came out of nowhere. Also out of nowhere, she changes the subject. I would be willing to bet that whoever came in here placing that order is the inside guy at Massacre Manor. Oh, did I tell you that his villain lair is called Massacre Manor and his guards are called the Malevolent Guards? I probably forgot to mention that. Anyways, back to what we just said. I would be willing to bet that whoever came in here placing the order is the inside guy at Massacre Manor. Yeah, no fucking shit. That's what the entire conversation with the blacksmith was about. Is this an episode of Scooby-Doo? Does the author think that writing this scene where that was spelled out to us in multiple ways was somehow not sufficient for adults? She's like, let's find out who it is and then use the intel to like switch the mole and they can inform us on King Benedict, make them our mole. And I'm like, you don't even know who the mole is at this point. That's kind of important context on like whether or not that would even be fucking possible. We could have cut out that entire section and just jumped to the next paragraph, which is, we know we're most likely looking at a man based off the information Malcolm and the blacksmith gave us, but we can't rule out other possibilities. And the villain says, do you mean Becky, back at the office? And she says, it's possible. She wants it to be Becky because she doesn't like Becky. Sure, it's possible that it's Becky, but anything is possible. That's the thing. So why aren't we considering like multiple things, especially multiple people? Again, why aren't we considering that there's a whole network of moles? The king has the time, energy, and resources and people available, which again is probably a resource, to create a network of moles to go up against Tristan. He knows that Tristan is the villain. Why not consider this as a possibility? And we could also consider that we could make a list of who in the office has things that could be exploited by the king that would make them want to join such a group of moles. Instead, we're having this basic ass Scooby-Doo conversation when we are adults. The entire last two chapters I just went over felt so incredibly poorly written, it gave me whiplash, because now that we have re-explained for the class the obvious conclusion and avoided explaining what's going on with the knife, and also Evie doesn't think that she should even ask about that rumor with the villain being mentored by the king, like she just never brings that up. We then move on to the next paragraph, which is so ridiculous in its attempt to insert humor in a place where it's not wanted or remotely relative. She asks, what do we do about him, as in the blacksmith? The next sentence is, her whole body was starting to feel fatigued, like she'd run 100 miles, which was unlikely. Running and her went together like lightning and metal. Completely irrelevant to what we're talking about. I don't care that Evie doesn't like running. I don't need to know that here. That's completely so far removed from what we are doing here. Since they have made themselves look highly suspicious walking into this place, asking a bunch of questions, and then beating the shit out of this dude, they now have to find a way to keep him from talking about this whole interaction, which will very obviously lead people to the conclusion that Tristan is the villain. But again, I don't really understand why the king doesn't just release that information himself. So now the villain is going to be sending in guards after the fact to beat this man further into being convinced to leave town forever, which is an objectively terrible plan. But don't worry, we're going to ignore the plot holes and focus on details that absolutely do not matter, because Evie wants to know, how will they know where to come? And Tristan has something called a collar's crystal. I'm going to read you this part and then remind you that it's completely irrelevant, despite the fact that we learn about it. You're going to call them here with a crystal? It's a collar's crystal, Sage. How'd you get one of those? Collar's crystals were hard to find. The jagged and colorful objects were magically made, usually one at a time, but eventually resulting in a full set. Each crystal of the set was made from a piece of the largest of them, like a beacon. Evie had heard a story of them once when she was 6 years old and used to pick up every shining gem in her mother's jewelry box, hoping if she dreamed hard enough, someone would come find her. I have friends in high places, Tristan said. The guards will be here shortly. Why did I need to know any of that? It never comes up again. We didn't take any time to explain the magic of the different people, magic system in this. We just took a huge paragraph to explain a convenient plot device. Okay, great. Why is this just being introduced now? Further question, Evie's just finding out that he has this after being his assistant for months, and logistically this never came up before? Okay, this feels like an idea that was made up on the spot and it didn't get reworked to have continuity throughout the rest of the story, which again makes it a device of convenience. She then asked him, is there any way to close the link between the wound in my shoulder and the blacksmith's blade? He says he will have Tatiana, his healer, look into it, but she isn't really ready to tell him why there is a link. This was not mentioned at any point before. Again, that's at like page 180, so about halfway through the book. Where did this come from? Why didn't it get brought up sooner? How many times have I heard about her nose scrunching and how Tristan likes his cauldron brew, which is their, you know, coffee, his cauldron brew super duper sweet, but she had something incredibly traumatic happen to her that has been formative in her life over the last few months, and I'm only learning about it at 50% in. See, the thing with the mom, that got mentioned from the jump, even though we didn't know exactly what happened. It was, you know, mentioned, and it was mentioned that that was formative in her life. But this thing with the shoulder is so bad, she can't even talk about it, and we just learned about it. Not just that, but we also just learned about the Gouvra, which is going to be important throughout the rest of the story, the bat snake thing, and that's relevant in the next chapter. We've been doing basically nothing for 50% of this book except infantilizing our main character, and now we've done everything but the kitchen sink all at once, and still none of it is cohesive. So in the next chapter, the villain and the head of the guards, who is named Keely, his malevolent guards, if you forgot that they're called that, are capturing the Gouvra. It's a male Gouvra, it's not brown like a female, and it says, Tristan scanned the creature's every move, a kaleidoscope of bursting and twinkling color. This is the fourth book I've seen use kaleidoscope like that. The most recent one I read was Gothicana, and before that was Fourth Wing, and it made zero sense in Gothicana and Fourth Wing and the other ones too. But at least I can say in this book it makes a little bit more sense in that sentence. Also, this is written in a way that while it's technically, I think, like set in like medieval time, like fantasy, but make it medieval, kaleidoscope would technically be like anachronistic, but because this is like supposed to be, you know, funny in the way that Monty Python is, I let anachronisms go for fantasy that is comedy, like Monty Python. So I'm just trying to, again, this is subjective. This one time it doesn't feel weird as far as like, you know, use of descriptive text, the word kaleidoscope. So I'm trying to give credit where credit is due. I'm trying to say one nice thing. But of this same sentence where it says twinkling, it says twinkling, he'd been spending too much time with Sage. Again, the grumpy sunshine thing works when it's not romanticizing infantilization. So this kind of stuff just makes me roll my eyes. However, again, this is subjective because if I'm being honest with you and myself, I don't think that this particular line, if it had been a mentor-mentee relationship, like again, Wreck-It Ralph and Vanellope, I don't think I would be rolling my eyes. Like, I just don't want to lie and say that that line wouldn't make me chuckle in a different context, but because that context is we are romanticizing the infantilization, I roll my eyes at it. The reason that he wants the Gouvra is partly because he wants the news that he captured one to make its way back to King Benedict. They have a sleeping potion that they're going to use to knock it out. The Gouvra sprays purple venom, which is apparently goo that can melt entire people and trees into dust, and he only needs to catch the male because he wants to catch the female. So they catch the Gouvra. Holding a Gouvra, he says, always has a natural consequence, and the consequence of this having a Gouvra is a storm. So when they get back to the, you know, what is it called? Malevolent Manor? Magnificent Manor? Whatever the fuck it's called. The Manor, the evil lair. Holding this Gouvra causes a storm, and Evie's like, oh, I'll get the bedrolls out because we're all going to be stuck here for the night, but don't worry, the narrative makes sure to add time to let us know Evie has small hands. Thank you for that. The female Gouvra is also in captivity according to the villain. As soon as he said this, I was like, oh, so obviously the king has the female. And I don't know why he couldn't have just said that and said, I'm using the male to lure the female, but instead he says, the female is in captivity, and Evie's like, oh, I know, the female must be with King Benedict. The way that this is written is so silly, and I mean that in the derogatory, because it's just written to make this woman seem like a baby, but also like her daddy boyfriend is leading her to the very obvious point, instead of just conversing like adults. And he's like, wow, very astute, Sage. And I'm like, oh yes, wow, very astute. You led her there as if pointing it out on a fucking map. You left breadcrumbs all the way to it instead of just directly saying it to her and her saying, you know, a normal adult response back. It's ridiculous. So everybody starts drinking since they're all just sitting around waiting for this female goover to show up in this storm. No discussion on what the plan is, of course, because why would we plan what happens when this enormous, angry, mad creature shows up and starts damaging everything and possibly kills people? But we make it a point to make sure that in this version of The Office, Becky is being such an Angela. So the female goover does show up, and as they are dealing with this attack, for which again they made no plan for some reason, there's a lot of romantic yearning and touching happening, and I feel like we're not prioritizing things in a way that makes sense. So then, after they catch the female goover too, Tatiana is talking to Evie and says that she knew the villain growing up, and Evie thinks, I never thought of the villain being anything other than born fully grown. Oh yes, as opposed to Evie, who was born sexy yesterday. Tatiana actually has an interesting backstory. Again, I probably would have liked this if Tatiana was the main character. Her mother threw her a 10th birthday party, and she had healing magic that they thought could be core magic. I guess core magic is stronger than normal. I don't really understand it. Again, the magic is not explained in this whatsoever. And at her birthday party, when her magic, you know, came to be, which I guess like something has to happen for your magic to kick in. Although, is it something traumatic? I don't think anything traumatic happened to her for hers to kick in, but for Evie's mom, it was a trauma thing. And then also for Tristan, again, I don't know. I don't understand this magic system at all. So at her birthday party, people were dragging her from person to person, getting her to heal people. That's fucked up. That's an interesting backstory for a kid to have to go through something like that. You know, like this is your birthday party, you're being exploited for your magic. And so Tristan showed up as a kid, came to her party after everybody left. Tristan brought her a birthday cake and sang happy birthday to her. I think I would prefer, again, if Tati were the main character and she was, you know, experiencing being the healer in this, you know, network of siblings doing villainry, and she's in love with one of the siblings, and, you know, sure, like, I don't mind that Evie could be there. I would just prefer that Evie was a non-infantilized adult woman who, you know, was interested in one of the villains, Tristan. I just would have preferred if it was about Tati and Claire. One of their maps in the office is missing. I did not realize that they even had maps or what they do with them. And there's only 3 keys that could have unlocked it. He doesn't say who has the 3rd key. He gives everybody the next day off except Evie, and she and him are supposed to go look for clues on who's the mole. Just then, 2 interns are coming in as her and the villain are at work talking about this, and for some reason Evie and the villain hide and listen to them, and they're talking shit about Evie. One of them says, she looks like she'd get lost in her own home. No, she doesn't look like she'd get lost in her own home. She looks like an adult woman. She acts like she'd get lost in her own home. I feel that way about Evie because of how she was written. That was a writing choice. I hate siding with the shitty interns here, but that was in fact the writing choice. And in fact, even in this scene, it says Evie covers the villain's mouth so he doesn't say anything, but we take the time again to say she covered his mouth with her small hand. Every opportunity is taken to make Evie seem like an unaware small bean child, which is weird because she got, again, parentified by her dad, having to be in charge of raising her sister when their mom left and her dad has been ill with, by the way, something called the mystic illness, and Tati supplies like healing potions for her dad. It says Evie felt like something important was about to be said but couldn't explain why. I thought that there would be a magical reason for this, but nope. It just said that in the narrative rather than just allowing to happen naturally. So the interns say, did you hear the day of the explosion? There was a mask with the king's emblem found in a stairwell here. Now, my first question is, I cannot believe that this did not get reported to Tristan. My guess is they didn't want to be deemed guilty for coming across it and reporting it. Okay, alright, sure, that answer makes sense. However, my question is, didn't everybody take one of those employment bargain oaths? Wouldn't lying be breaking that oath? Or was it just Evie who had to make an employment bargain? And if so, why? Evie catches Becky running into the forest wearing the mask with the king symbol on it. Becky says that one of the interns brought her the mask, but she was too afraid to give it to Tristan, and Becky wanted to sneak into the Gleaming City with it and try to get a mythical cure for the mystic illness, the same one that Evie's dad has because Becky's grandmother also has the sickness. They hate having something in common with each other. This story should have just been friends to enemies between the two of them. If we have to focus on Evie, why can't we just have a friendship between her and Becky? And they could have pulled off a heist to steal the cure from the king. I would like that. Back at home, someone left a note in her room that says, you know who I am, looking for a cure, come meet me tonight at Briar's Peak, dressed for a formal event. And when she gets there in her rainbow dress and butterfly pins in her hair, Becky and Blade have also been invited. So at this point, we have only introduced 3 primary employees outside of Evie: Tatiana, Becky and Blade. So we have ruled out Becky and Blade as the mole, so now the only answer can be Tatiana, or it's Kingsley the Frog, which, God, I wish that had been the answer. But Tatiana didn't get invited to this thing, so it seems kind of obvious at this point that the author is trying to make you think that the next, you know, oh, it can only be Tatiana, which was very heavy-handed. So at this party, a guy introduces himself as Arthur, the core healer and Tristan's father. I don't know if there can only be like one core healer, or, I mean, he calls himself the core healer, so I don't really know. He says, oh, you know my son, and you asked for an invite, and you asked that I be here. She says, no, I didn't do that at all. He says that he already knows that his son is the villain. And speak of the devil, once again, we have another, oh, he's right behind me, isn't he? The villain sneaks up on them. In the villain's POV, we learned that his employees were meeting up suspiciously, and his guards reported this to him. So that begs the question, is he having them followed all of the time? And if so, wouldn't that easily rule out who could not be the mole? Okay. We get told Evie's eyes widen again when we learn that Tristan never wanted to see his dad again. And Tristan says he wants to talk away from his dad, and Evie just bolts. She just runs. And so she and Tristan end up talking. He says that he has daddy issues. His dad wasn't around much because he was the core healer. His dad didn't try to bond with him or show him affection, but then later showed more affection to his other siblings. Then the villain and Evie dance, which I don't hate. I just wish that we'd bonded like this way sooner rather than what we did for the first 60% of this book, and I wish that we had not been taking so much time to infantilize Evie. He explained to her that his dad caused him pain by keeping him at arm's length. I wish that, again, that we had talked about this way sooner, because that's a good backstory. But I have read 60% of a book where I just don't know this man, and this hasn't really helped me contextualize anything. It's not really a surprise. We should have been doing way more work beyond, I keep people at arm's length because my dad kept me at arm's length. We could have progressed beyond that at this point. Then they're screaming. The Gouvres are there. Someone let them out, and they are attacking and killing people. And they're like, someone must have let the Gouvres out. So they assume that the person who lured them to the party also set the Gouvres free, which, I mean, sure, yeah, unless it's a network of people, and you've given me no reason why it couldn't or wouldn't be a network of people. The villain realizes that his sister, Claire, is there, and he tries to make sure that she's okay. Claire says that she will make a sleeping draft for the Gouvre, and then Tristan gets knocked out. Meanwhile, Tristan's dad and Evie get taken by guards, but like for safety, and Evie makes the guards, this whole scene was very confusing, but Evie like decides to make the guards uncomfortable by crying hysterically and saying she's on her period, and then she sees Tristan is about to wake up, and she thinks, I have to do something to prevent him from waking up and seeing we're surrounded by guards because he'll kill them all. So as soon as he's conscious, she kisses him to distract him. In his POV, it mentions how she smells like vanilla because she eats so many vanilla candies, and that used to make him chuckle, but now he finds it arousing. Arousing is the word used. I'm not joking. He thinks he's dreaming, so he's like, why not? Let's make out. She tries to explain, you know, I'm doing this because, you know, we're surrounded by guards, and he kisses her again, still thinks he's dreaming, and then asks, what were you going to say, love? And you want to guess what happens? Her eyes widen. But then she never asks, why did you call me love when we were making out? Anyways, so some guards make her and Tristan go with them. They want to interrogate them because they're suspicious of Tristan's dad. Again, I don't understand this because the king knows that Tristan is the villain. Okay, it got really fucking convoluted. These dudes are gross. They're like making sexual advances towards Evie. Evie bites one and kicks him in the nuts. The villain ends up killing one because they, you know, were dishonoring Evie. And Evie is grateful, and the villain realizes then that he's in love with her and vows to himself to never tell her. I'm sure that'll pan out. They find Becky, who got thrown off a moving horse. Evie grabs her knife to go teach the guards a lesson who threw her off a moving horse, and her boss says, the villain says, that's not a fair fight. And I'm like, oh, he's about to say it's not a fair fight for the guards. And he does, because the predictable humor in this is the kind of predictable humor you find in a Disney show for children.
Things are about to get real.
Wow, Tori and Beck are here. Who'd have thunk that they'd be... I mean, what a coincidence. Oh, who am I kidding?
Which again is fine for children. Tristan and Claire's dad is assumed to be the villain. He's taken in for questioning, and Claire is pissed at Tristan about this. I'm confused again because Doesn't the king know that Tristan is the villain? Isn't that what we've been saying? Why arrest his dad? What does he get out of arresting his core healer? Claire, again the villain sister, and Tatiana the healer take Evie to Tati's room, shut the door, and then say, this will hurt. And the end of the chapter says, and then it does. So then in the next chapter, it's the villain's POV. The villain, who's been looking alone around the place for evidence of like who's the mole, realizes that Tatiana is the only person left who could be the mole. Everyone was accounted for when the Guvra was released except for Tatiana. And then he hears screaming coming from Tatiana's room. He busts down the door, and it turns out they were breaking the binding between Evie and the dagger. So I thought that this was just so cheap. Like, we set it up to make it seem like we, were hurting Tati, and Claire were hurting her, only for it to be like we just missed part of the conversation for shock value in a way that feels very cheap. Why didn't they just tell the villain about this beforehand, that they were going to break the connection between the dagger and Evie's wound? Like, why not just communicate that to him so that when he is inevitably in his own castle hearing his assistant screaming, he doesn't break down the door? Why not communicate that? The only reason that this wasn't communicated was so that it could be a bad setup for the sake of a dramatic effect upon the reader, which is incredibly cheap. The villain asks Tatiana, where were you the night the Guvra escaped? And she laughs and says she was at a tavern and he can check her alibi. So it's not Tatiana. So at this point I'm thinking, okay, well, Tatiana was mentioned to be able to erase memories, so maybe somebody else who has the ability to erase memories is having actually Evie smuggle out the information and then making her forget that she's been doing this. Unfortunately, that idea is not what happened. Claire, the villain sister, the one who does magic ink, says that magic blue ink, and this is the first time this is coming up, by the way, if you use a drop of ink from a pot that someone else had just written and you use magic blue ink, you can see what they last wrote. Like, it'll appear on the page before you or something. The way that this was worded was a little confusing. So Evie steals the ink from Claire because Claire said, I have to make more ink for this client of mine named East Marigold. So Evie, hearing this, has like some sort of reaction to it and then steals the ink from her. I reread this chapter twice and it was written in a way that was so confusing, and it was because you find out that this is like revealing, like this is Evie realizing something, but this is very cheap. I'm trying to find the best way to word this. So the reason that this doesn't work is because you have not been given all the context that Evie has, but you've been given enough context that you've been asking basic questions that Evie has not been asking. So now that we're catching up, we're still discombobulated because, again, Evie was written to be stupid. We weren't given the context we needed to figure it out, and we were given enough context to ask basic questions that Evie's not asking herself. It's just not good. At this point, I'm just going to go through the end of the book with you because it gets really convoluted really fast. I was making another order for East Marigold. Evie's smile didn't fall from her face somehow as she turned and left the room, a renewed sense of purpose in her steps and more than one vial in her pocket. Of all the fancy bottles on the shelves near the door, yes, Evie had a good use for this one. So you have as much context as I had while reading this. Very confusing. The East Marigold thing never came up in the entirety of this part of the book, and it could have because it was relevant. We could have met Evie at the same time with the East Marigold thing. That should have been the reveal where we said, oh shit. Instead, we saved that reveal for this chapter when it would have made the exact right time impact here, but instead we just save it. I'll explain. Evie goes home where she lives again with her dad, who has the mystic illness, and her younger sister Lissa. He says, how is work? She says, it was productive. He says, as it should be. Idle hands lead to nothing but trouble. It's good you keep busy. And she says to him, Papa, did you know what a hard time Mama was having with her magic all those years ago? Did you understand how she struggled, or was it all a shock in the end? And he says, I knew when it was too late. So then she goes to his office and she finds a letter, and it's signed with love, Nura Sage, as in a note from her mother, which as far as she knows, her mom has never tried to contact them. That's where the chapter ends, and then the next one is in Tristan's POV. Marvin, who is said now some 300 pages into the book to be Tristan's favorite knight, shows up and tells Tristan, Blade, Claire, and Tati that the knight who bought the blue ink, who bought the timepiece from the villain's brother Malcolm, he's dead. What? Claire staggered. So someone got to him first? No, you don't understand, the villain said. The knight, Lark Moray, perished a day after purchasing your ink. He couldn't have been the one to get the clock from Malcolm. He was already gone at that point. Again, what does this matter? What does it matter who bought what? Again, why were you never considering the idea that there was a network of guards being sent after you because the king knows who you are? It wasn't him then who set the bomb, Claire said, but then she covers her mouth in shock. East Marigold. Who? The villain says. The man who came to see me. He uses a fake name. I mean, we all knew East Marigold had to be an alias. It's ridiculous, but he came drunk just the other night and accidentally gave me the real one. And after he left, I checked the town registry to make sure he wasn't some criminal. And it was there. His name was Griffin Sage, so it's Evie's dad. And there was Kingsley, the frog, holding a sign at his feet that says father. No shit. I cannot believe that this is what we used the animal companion for. Ridiculous. That's by the gods. That's Evie's father, Tatiana finished. No shit. Yeah, we get it. Rebecca says, where is it? She always takes her notebook home, Tatiana says. Evie and I were having one of our friendly chats. I might have said something about her ordering subpar office supplies, and she bragged about her father gifting her this special ink. The special ink only came up one time previously. When was that, Rebecca? The villain asked. About a week after she started working here, sir. When the ink was purchased. So this extremely messy chapter is saying that Evie's dad gave her special kind of ink so that when she came home, he would copy everything out of her notebook because it would write itself with the special blue ink. Whatever Evie wrote in her book, her father was able to see it. Our plans, our safe houses, even how to get in and out of the manor undetected. She was always writing everything down. What a fucking terrible idea. She's been writing all that shit down and you have said nothing? You don't think that that's a really stupid idea? Anybody could attack her on her way home. King Benedict knows who you are. He obviously could find out easily who works for you and then use that to track her down and see if she has any information. And wouldn't you know it, she has a whole notebook full. What the fuck? The ink has been dyed. Someone mixed a few drops of red in here to make it look purple, but it's blue and contains all the magical properties, so it's the copycat ink, so it will copy whatever she says. Her father tricked her, Tristan said. He knew she worked here all along and he used her. He put a bomb in my desk. He nearly killed her. He would have killed her. So in the next chapter, the POV is Evie, and she's looking at notes from her mom at her dad's desk, and it says things like, sorry, please, I miss them. When she saw Gideon's name, she threw the paper down, unable to take any more. It knocked over her father's inkpot, spilling the context, and she sees that he has blue ink. What are you doing in here, Evangelina? Her father's smooth voice carried in from outside the door. What is this? Evie whispered. It's ink for my letters. You shouldn't be in here. Something in his tone had changed. Yeah, it's called making him into a character that he wasn't previously throughout the rest of the book. It's blue ink. It's incredibly rare. Why would you want it? It's useful for reading documents. It's such a weird ass way to answer that question. There was a coldness in his words, and though his mouth had tipped into his normal friendly smile, Evie saw a flat, lifeless glimmer in his blue eyes that turned her blood cold. If I look in this desk, what will I find? They get into a physical altercation. She kicks him in the leg with a stiletto heel, and it makes a satisfying crack. You've been using the ink to spy on me. And then she finds another letter from King Benedict. You work for the king? Yeah, no shit. What did you think the blue ink was for? How are you still catching up? East Marigold, and the blue ink. How are you still, oh my god! This most horrific of truths would bury her in a sea of despair with a current so strong it would drown her brutally. That sentence is completely overwritten, but the point is, this most horrific of truths, you didn't realize that sooner? Isn't that why you went home? Isn't that why you were suspicious of him in the fucking first place? Okay. She says, did you plant the bomb that almost killed me? He said, yes, I did. How? You had the entry points written in the cursed journal. I relayed to King Benedict where to attack when necessary to ensure your employer didn't interfere. And he's like, don't wake your sister. She says, oh, are you afraid she'll see what a monster you've become? And he's like, ah, fuck, I just tore my book a little bit with my tabs. Dang, whoever gets this book next, I'm sorry. He's like, that man you've disgraced yourself with, he's the monster, not I. She's like, that monster is the reason we've been able to stay in our home. And the only reason you're alive, thanks to his potions. And he has a reason for what he's done. Oh yes, we are, of course, making black and white villains, and the one morally gray person is always going to be the love interest. How unique. And he's like, you wouldn't have to do any of this if you had just agreed to the blacksmith's offer, because the blacksmith had offered to have her be his like sexual companion, and I guess her dad knew about it. You knew that Mr. Worson was gonna attack me? It wasn't as all dramatic as that, Evangelina. He came to me and offered me a little extra money in exchange for a few nights a week of your company. Do you even hear yourself? Do you even care that that man nearly assaulted me? You always do this. She feels invalidated, and it says Evie felt like she had been looked down on on being made to feel childish or silly or frivolous with her thoughts and feelings. You were written that way. You were written to be childish and silly and making frivolous innuendo where it does not belong. You blow things up in your head to make everyone else the bad guy. Your mother was the same. Don't talk about her. Oh, so now your mother's a saint? She killed your brother. She left you and Lissa. Was that the first letter she sent since she left? That's what I thought. It's not. She's been sending letters. And now you've alienated not only your wife but your elder daughter. Alienated. But she still left. This isn't answering the question of did she kill her brother or not. That was not my intention. If someone's willing to trade me for sexual favors without my consent and also places a bomb in my workplace knowing full well it could kill me, I don't think those are the purest of intentions to you. I lost you the moment you tainted yourself with that man. What happens to you now, while devastating, is out of my hands. This is giving Fundy Dad. You not only betrayed me, but you somehow find a way to blame me for it. The only reason I did any of the things I have done was to help you because you were sick. I was never sick, he says. I never had the mystic illness. I lied. Judas. The healer was paid to tell you and the rest of the village that I had the illness so I could have an alibi. The butcher's shop was supposed to be a front, but it was beginning to interfere with my real profession. And what is that? Evie said. I was and still am one of King Benedict's valiant guard. Hold on. So a healer was paid to tell everybody in the village and his daughter that he had the mystic illness so that he could work undercover for the king. But the king couldn't pay him? Is that what I'm being led to believe? The king couldn't, when the butcher shop didn't work out, the king couldn't find a way to, get him money? So Evie had to work? What? What do you mean? How could you? You made Lissa and me think we were suffering. Put the entire financial burden of our household on my back. We never suffered for money. I had plenty. That you kept for yourself. Wait, I don't understand why he would, what was the point of that? What was the point of that? What was he spending it on? I don't understand. Why would you do that? Why would you try to offer me to the blacksmith? My particular brand of work for King Benedict has always been secretive, covert. It's why I had to lie about my retirement. No one could know I was a valiant guard. I needed to remain anonymous in the world, but still be able to disappear when I needed to. Something that could confine me for long periods of time, about which no one would grow suspicious. When I saw one of our neighbors catch the illness, I was inspired. That doesn't make sense. I'm still not understanding where the money is going. Otto Worsen, the blacksmith, wanted to marry you and you denied him. I don't suppose you ever asked what I wanted. We should have done more work about Evie being parentified. This is really lazy. I think you've well proven that you are not fit to make those sort of choices for yourself, just like your mother. What did you do to her? When her power came, she was supposed to work for the king. She ruined that all on her own, and now you're ruined right along with her. You're not telling me something. You were meant to marry Otto so I could have one less child to worry about. Eventually, you would all be off my hands and I could retire. After I told everyone I was miraculously cured. There is no cure. Not yet. Okay, well then I don't understand what happened to her mother. When did you find out I was working for the villain? I didn't at first. I was working on something else for the king, a project of sorts, but when Lissa was at school and you were there, King Benedict had a letter delivered detailing an incident observed by some of his other guards of a girl traipsing through the forest, a girl they identified as my daughter with the villain. I began reporting to the king that very day, and you became the key to the villain's downfall. Dun dun dun. And now you will help me get the mated goovers back for the king. What does he need them for? The greater good. You don't even care that you ruined your life. No, I didn't. If anyone ruined anything, Dad, it would be you. I wanted to be wrong, but I knew I wasn't the moment I heard that name. This is where we learned why and how Evie was tipped off by the name East Marigold. I didn't notice the ink or the invitation to see the core healer in my room or the notebook you gifted me my first week, but when I heard the name of a story you made up as one of Claire's clients, I knew it was you. See, we could have established that Evie told stories about East Marigold at any point. Multiple points would have been preferred, but instead we just said it now. I don't understand why. Continuity, where? And it turns out that the healing potion she gave him when she first got home this evening was actually a slow-acting sedative. Before he passes out, he says the villain is a monster. We're all monsters in the end. At least mine lives in the light. Oh boy. So heavy-handed. I feel like I'm being beaten over the head. In the villain's POV, we learned that the employee bargain he made with Evie in gold ink is actually the one that's on her skin and his skin isn't an employment bargain. Green ink is for employment bargains. Gold ink is for protection bargains. I don't know why this knowledge is only I don't know why people don't know this regularly. I don't know how common employment bargains are. I don't know if she's the only one who had one and why she wouldn't think, why is everybody else is green and mine is gold. Anyway, she has an employment bargain with him that's actually a protection bargain, not about her employment at all. So if she's ever in danger, her ink will let his ink know. It's so he can protect her, and this is sort of like one of those leash backpacks that parents put on children.
I'm pretending I got another text. It's from Rob, his friend Billy Kwan.
It's for their own good. Who cares if Evie is an adult who didn't consent to this? And why, you may be asking, did he decide to do this when she got the job? Because her eyes seemed honest. You gotta be kidding me. By the way, I'm still asking, do all the rest of the employees have an actual green ink bargain tattoo? And if yes, why isn't that how we ruled out who could not have been the mole? Based on, you know, who was dead because of the employment bargain. The villain shows up, Tristan, whatever you want to call him. Tristan shows up. They take Tatiana's there too. They take Lissa and Evie back to the whatever it's called, magnificent malevolent manor, and they finally reveal to Lissa that Evie is not a maid for a rich guy, and she explains to Tristan that her dad set her up and she was attacked by Mr. Warson, the blacksmith. I felt dirty for weeks after Mr. Warson attacked me. I still do sometimes. My father offered me to him. Are you saying that your father is the reason Mr. Warson hurt you? She tells him the story about how Otto Warson had made it clear he wanted her and how she made it very clear she didn't want him. He lunged for her, and when she had tried to run, he'd ripped her sleeve and then run that dagger down her back, and she never told anybody what happened to her. Which, while sad, is like, yeah, that's what I assumed happened. I thought that the reveal was going to be something that wasn't like that, because it had to be like, I don't know, I just thought it was going to be more than that. I've imprisoned my own father. Does this mean I'm evil now? Oh my father is a monster and my mother's abandoned me. Of course I'm evil now. That's like every villain's origin story, right? Oh, please. I just want to be done so bad. This is so silly and stupid. You're not evil, Sage. You made a difficult choice. And she's like, can you tell me what the king wants with the mated Guvras? So then next chapter is in Evie's POV. They sat down on the sofa. Her boss looked like he was in great pain. The pinched look of his mouth made her chest hurt. He crossed his arms, then uncrossed them, finally settling them on his thighs. Evie wouldn't mind having her hands there as well. Focus, you absolute nincompoop. I need this to stop immediately. I can't take this anymore. We're almost done though. We only have a few pages left. So he starts telling her what happened. I found out about the Guvras when I became an intern for King Benedict almost 10 years ago to the day. Evie was shocked speechless. She literally couldn't think of a single thing to say. Something that hadn't happened to her that hadn't happened to her ever. And she's like, if you don't want to. She didn't want him to feel like he had to, but he held his hand up to stop her. Only tell me if you want to. I don't want you to feel like I'm holding you down with a knife to your throat. She was going for sympathetic, but then the words were out in the open and Evie realized too late how explicit they sounded. His dark brows furrowed together and his lips squeezed tight. I meant because I wasn't going to pin you down. You know what? And then she fake locks the corner of her mouth with an imaginary key and opened her boss's hand, placing the key inside his palm. I'm so glad that that was there. I met King Benedict when I was 19 years old. I had been considering attending the university near the city, and on one of my visits I caught the attention of the magical specialist. My magic hadn't awoken yet, but he sensed something in me. Evie wanted to ask how a specialist could sense magic if it hadn't awakened yet, but she kept her mouth shut. No, please, answer the question. I would love to know myself. My magic is very distinct, which makes it easier to detect. The specialist then referred me to someone he thought could foster my abilities to the fullest potential. Another silence followed, and Evie knew he was gathering himself to tell her the worst of it. The reason he dragged men through the office by their hair. The reason she was greeted by severed heads so often on her way to work. The reason why he looked uncomfortable at any sign of affection. The reason her boss had become the villain. That honestly could have been over here, because obviously that's what we're doing, and I don't know why we're saying it after the fact when she's already told him, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. Like, I know that's what we're doing. Okay. Editing where? The king met me the next day. He offered me a position with him at his summer home as his personal apprentice. So the rumor was true then, which begs the question, then if certain people know about that, then why is it not widely known? I agreed so quickly, too quickly, but the king knew what words to say. His words were like webs, and by the time I realized I'd been caught, it was too late. He told me I had potential, that I was capable of great things. No one had ever said that to me before, and no one has since. I get it, dude. I have daddy issues too. The first few weeks were incredible. My mother and father were hesitant to let me go, but I couldn't be deterred. I had become obsessed with pleasing the king, with making him happy. I did everything he asked of me. Everything. And as what he was saying truly sunk in, she realized what exactly he meant by everything. The Guvra? Now, I don't understand how that was implied or what that even means. I helped him capture the Guvra. There were theories that the venom of a baby Guvra acted as a sort of cure-all. He kept telling me the end justified the means. I didn't know what he meant then, and I never had the chance to find out. I asked the king to know why every servant in his summer home seemed to cringe away from me, why the valiant guards walked in the other direction when they saw me coming down the hall, what I had done wrong, and he told me that my magic was dangerous. I had spent weeks and weeks with the man. He built me up so high I felt like nothing could touch me. When he told me that whatever was dormant inside me could hurt people, it shattered me. But your magic hadn't awoken yet. Why would King Benedict do that? He claimed he brought me there to see if that the problem could be managed before it was too late, but after observing me carefully, there was no hope. The king told me that if he allowed me to go free, I would be a danger to myself and everyone I loved. So all his magic seems to be is like pointing out weak spots. So I don't really understand. It's not explaining like how he would be a danger to himself and others. And like the best, smartest thing for King Benedict to do as the villain would be to show him ways in which his magic would be a danger to himself or others. So like if he accidentally hurt somebody and then King Benedict exploited that fear of that happening again, but we don't get any of that here. He told me his priority had to be the rest of the kingdom and it wasn't personal, it was for my own good. The valiant guards took me into custody then and there. I begged the king, I told him I would try to be better, but he wouldn't listen. But what, better than what? Like what happened? They took me to the cellars, they locked me in the dark, I was trapped in the darkness a month. Next chapter is in the villain's POV. My magic awoke then, I felt it pulsing beneath my skin, and it lit up the entire room. It helped me. I could see the door of the cell, the light coming from the guards, and I slaughtered them all. I escaped out a tunnel, and I vowed that if the king believed me a villain, that was exactly who I would become. But why would King Benedict wait so long to try and end you if he really believed you to be so dangerous? Who says he hasn't? Oh my, the men in the dungeon, the ones you torture. There must be over 3 dozen at least. So he has men in his dungeon who he's been torturing who were sent to kill him. Okay. All sent by our benevolent king to capture me or end my life. It's a mystery why he went through all the effort to come at me through your father. No, it's not. You have a bunch of his men and none of it has worked. So I don't understand. I don't understand this at all. Why would he do that? It doesn't answer that question that she just asked. Too many things happening. My brain can't process. She moaned, flipping her head up. Her hair was wild, teased like she'd just been. He would not finish that sentence. Perfect. I'm so glad that we took the time to say it at all. And she says, I think I need a hug, please. And he's like, I can't make hugs a regular occurrence. But you did it so well before. The little tornado's eyes scrunched in confusion, and he resisted the gratified feeling that she enjoyed their hug so much that she thought another was well advised. So then he gives her a hug. You're a good hugger, she says. I'll admit I'm out of practice, so that's good to hear. This is just, I can't not imagine her as a child. I hate it. Why did we write it like this? She's just a baby. They pulled away and Tristan was knocked breathless by how close his face was to hers. Evie seemed to be as well by the way her eyes widened. Again, he took a sharp inhale as her face drifted closer like she couldn't help it, like they were drawn together and they're about to kiss, and then a crash broke them apart, and it was Kingsley, the frog, who jumped into the kitchen table. I'm going to kill that frog. Tristan thinks to himself, if you kill the frog, I will have no reason not to jump into this book and kill you myself. That's the only thing keeping me reading is the fucking frog. So she needs to go back to her house. Of course she does, because she didn't bring her stuff with her. She has to go back to her house because we needed an opening for him to get captured. Absolutely. She's thinking, she should have kissed him. She'd wanted to, blah, blah, blah. She needs to go get her and Lissa's stuff from the house. Oh no, my notebook. I left it in my father's office. I'll purchase another for you. And before you say no, consider the budget of your supply budget. What? Consider it part of your supply budget. Sorry, the dyslexia is dyslexiaing. So they go get the notebook and some of her and Lissa's stuff. She says, we can have a tea party with Lissa. I realize once I find out what a tea party is, my ignorance will most likely be very amusing. She scrunched her nose, giving him a final grin before dancing ahead of him. And then he gets attacked. It's King Benedict and his guards. Who would have guessed? Me, Miss Sage. A wide, perfect smile spread across the king's handsome face. He was certainly into his late 40s, if not his 50s, with sprays of gray through his thick sandy colored hair. At last we meet. So he has the villain chained up with special cuffs. I didn't want it to come to this, really, the king tists. I was hoping to keep this clean. I was contented to let you play your little fairy tale role for as long as you desired, but now you're trying to ruin my plans, and that I'm afraid I cannot allow. So much potential, yet how disappointing you were. The Gouvras, I have a great need of them to aid in Rendon's very ... bright future. And Miss Sage, you were supposed to be my sweet little savior, but it turns out you were just as rotten as your father said. She calls the king a coward. I'm afraid I need my Gouvras back, Miss Sage. You see, without her mate, my Gouvra was unable to produce any venom in all my time with her. But now it would seem she does. She says, over my cold dead body. And who's there but Otto Warson, the blacksmith. He says, the king says that Otto can do whatever he wants to Evie, and realizes that Tristan is very attached to Evie. I believe I understand your attachment to this woman. I merely believed her to be somebody who worked for you. But I see now, I understand. I won't make you watch. He knocks out Tristan. Otto attacks her and chokes her despite having had his hand shattered by Tristan previously. I'm serving the kingdom by ridding the world of you. You don't belong here after debasing yourself the way you have. This death is a mercy. What could be better for the villain's whore? And the only weapon she has on her is the dagger that she has still not broken the pain connection with, but that's what she's got to use. So she says, actually, I'm his fucking assistant. She whipped the dagger up and slit his throat. Cool. I just wish that she was a badass all the time and not, you know, a child 99.99% of the time. Blood sprayed her face as he fell, eyes wide. Oh look, somebody with wide eyes that isn't Evie for once. There's 2 remaining knights, and for some reason, one of the knights, who is not identified, stabs the other through the chest and just takes the fuck off. Why we needed this there, I don't really know. Obviously it's set up for the next book, but it just feels so ridiculous to be in here. What in the Deadlands was that? Oh yeah, the Deadlands get mentioned a lot. Again, I don't need to know about their pantheon or religious beliefs. It's not important. I can let stuff like that go in books like this. Oh dang, I just ripped it again. That sucks. Sorry, person who gets this next. And then she takes Otto's head back to the manor and has somebody hang it up for her. And she tells the office, we'll get him back, talking about Tristan because he's captured now. I'll make sure of it, whatever it takes. And she tells Becky, I'm gonna need you to kill me. So obviously she's gonna fake her death and that's part of the plan. She would save the villain or become one trying. The end. Well, ... for now. All right, great, awesome. Just, yeah. This just wasn't good. I think that I have gone on and on about the infantilization thing, the nose scrunching and the wide eyes and the childlike aspects of her despite complaining about how she's treated as childish. I mean, it was written that way. That was a choice. I've gone on and on about that. It just makes me super uncomfortable because again, it's like Wreck-It Ralph and Vanellope. And you know what? It's cute when a person who is more sunshiny is the mentee of somebody else who seems like more grumpy. Remember that TikTok series where this young woman who was like really into cute stuff, like, you know, pink, became the apprentice to this dude who, you know, wears all black and does tattoos, and she became his tattoo apprentice.
And I now present this fucking thing.
I'm gonna be a boxing blueberry.
And that was the cool thing, was that it was like, it looked like Grumpy Sunshine in a tattoo environment. If this had become where he was like her parent and then it had become like a romantic / sexual thing, that's where I would have been like, oh, that's kind of weird. And don't get me wrong, like age play is a thing. I'm not shitting on age play between like consenting adult couples who want to do that. Why this gives me the ick is because it feels like gender roles that I experienced in Fundyland. Like if you might have seen the documentary Keep Sweet. That's not just in that sect of Fundyland. Being childlike is a quality that women and girls are told that we should be in Fundyland because our husband, we are supposed to be submissive to him. So like the men are in charge and the women are in charge of children, but the men are in charge of everybody. Basically making wives like a child. And if you are cutesy and girly and little and childlike, for some reason in Fundyland they teach you that that is desirable to men. That's part of why subjectively this gives me the ick. I obviously can't separate myself from that. I grew up in it. It's also why it exists outside of Fundyland too in a way that gives me the ick. Like Belle Delphine exists, and the fact that men are into her the more that she acts like a little girl makes me deeply concerned. I don't like that, and there was no reason for that to be in this book. We didn't need to make Evie stupid and childlike and you know, asking like very basic questions except ignoring the ones that make the most sense in context. The eyes widening, the nose scrunching, her sticking her tongue out at people, like it just was so over the top. So now that I've harped on that again, I'm done talking about it. Let's talk about how to fix this. I think that this would have done well if we would have maybe taken some of the aspects here and turned this into a retelling of Robin Hood. It doesn't have to be like an exact one-to-one, but something like that. What are the story beats of Robin Hood? It usually gets introduced that Robin Hood is typically a nobleman who becomes an outlaw, and one of the things I'll talk about later is how I think that it's better if we take out the nobleman thing, which like Tristan was the villain was, so I think that we should change that. He faces an injustice and becomes an outlaw. Okay, that's a good idea. We take that story beat, we put it in there, but we change it a little bit. What if it's multiple people who witness injustices? What if it's this entire group of siblings? So Malcolm, who never showed up again, Claire, and Tristan. So then the story beats of Robin Hood follow, like, you know, he faces the injustice and then he assembles the merry men. So Little John, Will Scarlet, Friar Tuck. So we assemble the siblings, and they can all be the villain figure, but also assembling, like, if you want to do The Office, then fucking do it. But I also need to know, like, what the fuck the logistics are, like how they are actually, what they're doing and how they are doing it and why all these employees are needed to do it. So then we do the robbing from the rich to give to the poor. That's one of the story beats of Robin Hood. It doesn't seem like Tristan's doing that, so I think that that's a very basic way in which we, you know, change shit for everybody. Tristan somehow has a ton of money. I don't understand how. And there seem to be people dealing with, you know, class status issues, money issues, and even sickness. So how can Tristan meet that need? How can all these villains meet that need in a way that King Benedict is not? Or, you know, maybe he pretends to, but he's not really doing it. Or maybe he's taking credit for doing it when it's really the villains doing it. Another story beat is that Robin frequently clashes with authority, particularly the Sheriff of Nottingham. I think that this really would have benefited from a Sheriff of Nottingham. Particularly, I think the idea could have been Evie could have worked for the Sheriff of Nottingham version of the, you know, in this book, and then Tristan came along to offer her better employment, or, you know, Claire, one of the villains, said, I can offer you better benefits, and she's like, okay, I'll take the job. Or her dad be the Sheriff of Nottingham type figure. Now, typically there's a Maid Marian, and I don't really see a way to make Evie a Maid Marian because I just can't fucking stand Evie, and I don't need her to be rescued any more than she already is. But what if we took the frog and made him the Maid Marian type character, in that he's always getting captured and they always have to go get him? Now, there's typically an archery contest in Robin Hood. We'd have to figure out something with, like, the villain, you know, doing that, but, like, what if there's, like, a talent show? Like, that would be silly. That would be a way to make it funny and silly. And then this is also a way that we can showcase, like, all the because I don't know any of these fucking villagers, all these people in these cities, like the village that the Gleaming City versus where Evie lives. I don't understand the difference. I don't know what the, like, distance is between these places or what exists outside of it. I really wish that we could have showcased more people and showcased their magic, and that's one way that we could have done that. And then typically there's the final showdown between Robin Hood and the you know, merry men and the Sheriff of Nottingham and his forces. And we could have done that. Instead, it was just like, the king always knew it was Tristan, and then at the end he arrests him. I don't really understand, like, why we needed her dad to do any of that. Like, he always knew that the villain was Tristan. So now that we know, like, the story beats, we can, you know, start making little tweaks and stuff in order to take this from a story that really needs a better structure, and, you know, taking that, like, fairy tale retelling, sort of like making some tweaks, right? This is just like a very basic idea. Like, this is, you know, I'm just spitballing. You take the story beats, but then you make changes as far as, like, subverting typical fairy tale ideas or typical fairy tale, like, stories within the particular story that you're trying to tell. So if we're doing a Robin Hood theme, I really would like to see a Robin Hood retelling that explores, like, socioeconomic realities, because they typically oversimplify socioeconomic issues. I'd really like to have us, like, delve into the complex issues of class struggle and poverty in this world and see how Tristan is trying to meet that need, or a group of villains is trying to meet that need, but also how the actions of these villains, because it can't be all good all the time, they have to be doing bad stuff in order for, you know, they believe the greater good. So I'd love to know how, you know, their stuff that they're doing impacts not only the wealthy but also the common people, and explore, like, ethical implications of their methods of, you know, getting justice on the society as a whole that they live in. I'd also like to see, like, highlighting the consequences of rebelling against such a high authority figure, instead of, like, romanticizing, he's a rebel, he's so morally gray. Explore, like, the consequences of collateral damage from what he's doing. How does his defiance of the law and of the king affect innocent bystanders? And how can we, like, depict the internal conflicts within, like, if we're doing, like, a band, right? If we're doing, like, the siblings as, like, this group called the villain, but it's all three of them, which is, like, I think a really cool idea. idea. How did they all grapple with the moral implications of their actions? Like, how far is one willing to go versus the other, and why, and does this cause conflict between them? I'd also really like to see us question this idea of nobility, or at least like not make, you know, the villain a noble who saw an injustice and finally decided to take the matter into their own hands. I would like to see a commoner or a group of commoners decide to create this moniker of the villain to meet the needs of their community, and not, you know, have like, oh, your birthright determined your value, and now we're not really talking about like meritocracy. Like, let's build him from, you know, he came from the lowest of the low, and collectively with others became this one name moniker that is in fact a network of people, sort of like Anonymous, who is doing the work to take down this incredibly dictator-ish overlord. Oh man, this is getting early for me. I'm getting tired. And again, like, Nimona is a book that also subverts like typical fairy tale tropes and does the grumpy sunshine with a mentor-mentee relationship. Like, this is the way to go. And I think that Nimona also does a great job in breaking those like gender stereotypes and subverting that. And I think that Assistant to the Villain sort of tried by making 0.01% of the time Evie do like something evil, like something bad. She's such a bad girl. But most of the time she's been infantilized. So I just don't buy it. It's not even worth being in there. But I do think that breaking away from traditional gender roles by featuring characters who defy stereotypes is a great idea. I think that we did introduce a more nurturing man character by way of Blade, but we still have like the manliest of man is this broody man character, so we're still doing typical gender stereotypes. I really would like to challenge this notion that like strength is a masculine trait inherently, and that women can aspire to it, but men can never like step down from it, otherwise they are less of a man. I don't like that. And that really was like showcased in this book, was like, everybody's less of a man than Tristan, just trust me. It's like, I don't care. I think that's stupid. So there's my rant on Assistant to the Villain. Wow, this is a lot of footage, isn't it? This is a long video, isn't it? Help me God. Oh no, I have so much editing to do. Fuck! And I have to leave in an hour, so I don't have time to like work today, because I've been filming this. It's currently 1 o'clock and I've been filming this since 10:30 in the morning. Great. I'm really looking forward to editing this. Alright, well, let me know in the comments what you think, if you read this and what your thoughts were on it, and if you want, leave your comments and questions down below. Okay, I'm so tired. I need to go. I need to go get a monster. Okay, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye!
Hello! Before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Brittany Bobitney, Cami, Choco's Trash for Japanese Mysteries and Thrillers, which you have Choco to thank for an upcoming review on a on a book that I did not know where that was going. We'll talk about it later. Chris the Horror Therapist, Dalton, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emerald Dodge, Emperor's New Blues, Aaron with 2 E's, Eric, Ethel Golightly, GalaxyBot, Jack, Jess, John E, Julie D, Kaleno K, Casey McKenzie, Kate W, Caitlin M, Lady Kittybug, Lemon Jelly, Lex, Lily B, Max B, Mommy Zami, Mixer Boneless, Alice, Panoramic Demon, oof, Peggy Lou, Rachel C, Rain, Reese, SJ, Samar, Scarlet, Shiny, SMK, Spoopy, Steph B, 2 Orbit, White Raven, Zorvictia, and Chai Guy. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. And last but not least, I also have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Starch Marxist patrons, and those are Alejandra, Amanda D, Amanda, Andy, Angelica, Anita, Artie the Ninth, Ava, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Blake Lemon Pants, Blythe, Bookish Bats, Bookish Brainrot, Bree, Caitlin, Cardinal Ginger, Carlin, Casper, Kate W, Catherine, Kathy, Chris, CJ, Clementine, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Cosmic, Darius, Danielle, Darren, Desiree, Diet Goth, Dilf Enthusiast, Dorian, Dorothea, Ebby, Emily A, Emily L, Emma, Emma O.A, Aaron, Ezra, Fiona, Gadarn, Hannah C, Harpy Kuro, Haley G, Ilianaka, India Inks, JM Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Genderqueer, Jenny G, Jessa Sue, Jill, Jillian, Jojo Bookish, Kat, Catherine, Katie, Kaylee, Kayala, Kendra, Kiara, KMTB, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura, Lauren, Lazarus Ray, Library of Scars, Lindsay M, Lisa B, Lisa L, LP, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Marcella, Marquita, Melara, Mentally Unwell, May, Molly, James, Natalie, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nyan Binary, Paige P, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rebecca R, Rivi, Ronnie, Rosie, Rowan, Secoria, Sadie, Saintbringer, Sakia Lume, Samantha, Sammy C, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Sarah Z, Shamed, Shannon, Sheen Onion, Sean, Super Evil Sam, T Delegati, Tay, Talia, 3 Old Dogs, Tiana, Trash Can Teddy, Triple M, Tito Phoenix, and Writer A. Thank you all so much for being a friend.